Hello and welcome to Kin in Line. This is part 2, and we're still on this first drawing book or layout pad or sketch pad or whatever you want to call it that I had at the East London Tech Art School in '75. As I mentioned in the first video, Jack Lugg, the head of the art school, used to take us out on these drawing expeditions. And I think this is the Bridal Drift Dam outside East London, overflowing nicely, which we don't see much of in Port Elizabeth, where I'm now based. Our dams are virtually empty. And as I speak, we have no electricity, so this is post-apartheid South Africa. Anyway, this wasn't necessarily a bad effort, I don't think, for a first year. At least I've captured this feel of the water plummeting down that slope. And then there's another one which I did on the same outing, which also works quite nicely. As I said, with object drawing and landscape like this, the one advantage is you can focus on your shading and trying to master the art of drawing in terms of describing form. So there's some good line work done there, actually. It starts to come spontaneously after about 5 years, but certainly not when you're a novice, and I was very much a novice. I hadn't been to any school art training, and actually Jack Lugg, our lecturer, said he preferred that because he didn't want people to pick up the wrong methods early because they were hard to undo. So this, I think, is the subsequent drawing pad that I had, and you can see there isn't much improvement on that last thing. This isn't necessarily a bad drawing, but again, very basic. Probably one of the better efforts, actually, for this early on. As I mentioned, it's as a young sort of 19-year-old, it wasn't easy sort of being confronted with a beautiful young woman like this, scantily clad. But Mr. Lugg obviously got models from all over, and African people were his main source. So the thinker, but look at what's glaringly missing. So I'm using these construction lines, which is what they want you to do, to line up things so that you do draw it as it sort of seems to appear. But the big flaw here is the foreshortening or lack thereof in the leg, particularly his right leg should be jutting out towards you, and you get a sense of depth from the knee leading back to his body. You get this lack of foreshortening actually with photo, what they're called, these lenses, long lenses with cameras. They sort of also flatten the shape of things. And yeah, we can see there's absolutely nothing going on there. It's such a tentative sketch. It's not worth trying to show it. Unfortunately, the paper is so fine that the drawings behind are shining through, but these aren't really great drawings. So this is just to give you a sense of the struggle and how difficult it was. I mean, I tried every device possible, thinking, oh, that'll just do the trick. And obviously it didn't. This was an old mate of mine. We used to also pose as students. We would be called upon to pose. This was Chris Coombs. And yeah, it just was an ongoing schlep. But the rewards weren't always evident. However, just looking at this, I see some improvement here. It's a nice handling of the arms jutting out, almost properly foreshortened. And this one has some fairly interesting shading around the neck. So this must have probably have been towards the end of the first or early the second year. So a bit of a long pose here, and let's see what we... Yeah, so it's gradually getting there. At least the hand is drawn and the feet. Look at this strange setup down there. Yeah. Okay, we'll see many of attempts at chess set designs. They became a bit of an obsession, digression. This isn't actually a bad little sketch, very pale. You can see what a thin fellow this was. And a great pose, actually. I mean, Lug's got him really contorted. Actually, this, despite being very pale, it's quite subtle but well-crafted drawings in retrospect compared to the other stuff. That's just another one of my early sort of designs for something which never came to fruition. Here again we've got it's probably that same thin guy. This would have been a longer pose. And I must have thought I was getting somewhere, but look how square that arm is. It's like a piece of wood. I don't know if they ever taught us properly to shade. I think the understanding was that you would work it out. But I'm quite willing to share my experience of how I sort of came by it. Yeah, this thin model was probably seemed to have done quite a few drawings of him. And here's a myriad little abstracts, none of much worth. Likewise there. And looks like that same thin model again. I think he kind of suited what little technique I had, because these aren't, I mean, look at that large foot. It's actually a good fault in a drawing to exaggerate the feet and establish a sense of stability and solidity in yeah, and then it's culminated in this quite bold, and if you look at the torso, quite well executed by, comparatively compared to the really weak drawings I've been doing thus far. I think this thin model certainly helped me start to find some sort of direction. You see how soon it dissipates. I mean, here I've kind of used this not cross-hatching, but just shading left to right or right to left in a vain attempt to, find a style. It wasn't really what you needed. It was not a style. You needed to just work it out how you were going to capture that form. Yeah, I guess there is some merit in there somewhere. It's certainly an improvement on that awful initial book of drawings. So I'm not showing these as examples of good drawing, but simply of stages that I went through to somehow do drawings. This was a technique that Mr. Lugg introduced, which I think helped a lot of us, was to get spontaneity of line. You would draw a figure without looking down at the paper at all. Just let your pencil follow the form and see what emerged. Obviously, these are very early days and I haven't really mastered it. But there is a bit of quality in that line, if not in the actual drawing. This one probably works better. As you can see, the upper torso looks quite interesting with the arms behind the head and the breasts and stomach probably quite well shown. And then the conclusion of a day's drawing was to do a long pose, half an hour or whatever. And the face comes out not too badly, I suppose. But really, the shading is very scratchy, and I was certainly just scratching for a solution here. A very light one. So this one actually works relatively well in that I've focused on the torso and just left the head barely suggested. I think this was a breakthrough, really. Pity it's so pale. And here the same model, and this was actually a fairly good drawing. I suspect this is towards the end of the second year. The feet again are nowhere, but in fact that one wasn't even drawn, which is a shame. Another very pale and non-existent one, and getting there again slowly. I think It's a pity they didn't explain to us that learning to draw is a long and tricky process. So that was my effort on the left. And then Mr. Lug popped along and gave me some instruction using his construction lines. Yeah. Again, my effort, and I think Mr. Lug trying to show me something. The bend of the back. This one probably works quite well in that it's not attempting to really pin down the figure, but rather just to explore where it is in space. And at least that has an aesthetic quality, which most of my other drawings don't have thus far. Here we're getting more solid again. At least his feet are there, his hands are there. And by good fortune, so is the face kind of decipherable. Anyway, I'm going to leave it at this for now. Cheers.